carrying a rare cargo. The forests, the plants, the growing things doomed to extinction on Earth.
They called it a love letter to a dying planet. But Silent Running wasn't just a film about trees and space. It was a rookie director's gamble, shot on an aircraft carrier with amputee actors inside robot suits, and a star who refused to make his character likable. One scene used real explosives. Another required surgical precision from men who couldn't see. And the ending? It made the studio so uncomfortable they almost demanded reshoots. These are 20 weird facts about Silent Running, and the bonus, let's just say even the trees had stand-ins. Strap in. This mission gets lonelier than you think. Before Silent Running, Douglas Trumbull wasn't a director. He was the man behind the impossible. He'd built the Stargate sequence for 2001, a space odyssey, creating visual effects that left Stanley Kubrick speechless and audiences stunned. But Kubrick was a demanding perfectionist who controlled every frame. Trumbull learned from him, absorbed his precision, his obsession with practical effects, his refusal to compromise. But he also realized something else. He wanted to tell his own story, not build someone else's dream. So, when Universal offered him a chance to direct, he didn't hesitate. The problem? Universal gave him almost no money. The budget was $1.3 million, pocket change even for 1972. Most of it went to building the spaceship sets. There wasn't enough left for experienced actors, elaborate costumes, or major marketing. Trumbull didn't panic. He'd learned how to create magic from nothing under Kubrick's brutal tutelage. He figured if he could build the infinite cosmos on a soundstage, he could make a forest float through space on a shoestring. What he didn't know was that his biggest challenge wouldn't be the budget or the effects. It would be convincing everyone that a movie about one man, alone with his plants, talking to robots, could actually work. Bruce Dern wasn't the studio's first choice. They wanted someone softer, someone audiences could root for without hesitation. A leading man with charm, warmth, a face that screamed hero. Dern had none of that. He'd spent his entire career playing villains, psychopaths, and unhinged supporting characters. He shot John Wayne in the back in The Cowboys. He terrorized families. He made people uncomfortable. That's exactly why Trumbull wanted him. The character of Freeman Lowell wasn't supposed to be a traditional hero. He was obsessed, isolated, possibly unhinged, willing to commit murder to save a forest. Trumbull needed someone who could make that feel real, not noble. Someone who could show the madness beneath the mission. Dern understood immediately. He didn't soften the character. He leaned into the edges, the desperation, the fanaticism. During filming, he refused to play for sympathy. Even in scenes where Lowell grieves or breaks down, Dern kept something sharp underneath, something that made you question whether this man was a savior or just another kind of destroyer. The studio watched the dailies and got nervous. They asked Trumbull to make Dern more likable. Trumbull refused, and that choice, that refusal to sand down the character's rough edges, gave Silent Running its soul. Because Freeman Lowell wasn't meant to be loved. He was meant to be understood, and sometimes that's far more dangerous. The Valley Forge wasn't built in a studio lot. It was built inside the Valley Forge, a decommissioned aircraft carrier docked in Long Beach, California. Trumbull needed a massive space for the geodesic dome forest sets, somewhere that felt industrial, claustrophobic, and real. A carrier's hangar deck was perfect. Rusted metal, tight corridors, the smell of oil and old machinery. Everything Trumbull wanted without having to fake it. But working on a floating museum came with problems. The ship had no power, no heating, no air conditioning. During summer shoots, temperatures inside the hangar climbed past 100 degrees. The plastic plants wilted. The crew collapsed from heat exhaustion. Dern, wearing heavy costumes under burning lights, filmed some scenes on the edge of passing out. Then winter came, and suddenly the problem was cold. The metal hull turned into a freezer. Cast and crew worked in coats between takes, breath visible, fingers numb. The ship also creaked, constantly. Every footstep echoed. Every door slam reverberated through the hull like a gunshot. Sound recordists had to work around the groans of settling metal, the distant hum of Long Beach Harbor, the occasional foghorn. What should have been controlled silence became a constant battle against the environment. But Trumbull never complained, because that discomfort, that cold, that isolation, it bled into every frame. The Valley Forge felt real because it was real. A dying ship carrying dying forests, and everyone on set could feel it. The robots weren't CGI. They weren't puppets on strings. They were people. 4 bilateral amputees, Mark Persons, Stephen Brown, Cheryl Sparks, and Larry Weisenhand, performers who'd lost their legs and found new purpose inside fiberglass shells. Trumbull needed the drones to move naturally, to feel mechanical yet alive, and no remote-controlled prop could deliver that. So he hired amputee actors who could walk on their hands, fit inside the drone suits, and bring personality to machines that had no faces. It was grueling work. The suits were hot, cramped, and nearly impossible to see out of. The actors navigated entirely by feel and verbal cues from the crew. They couldn't hear well, couldn't see their surroundings, couldn't move quickly or adjust if something went wrong. During one scene, a drone had to hand Dern a wrench, simple on paper, but inside the suit, Mark Persons had to judge distance, angle, and timing while blind and upside down. They rehearsed it 40 times. When they finally nailed it, the entire crew applauded. These performers weren't just operating the drones. They were creating characters. Huey, Dewey, and Louie became beloved, precisely because they moved with human imperfection. Little hesitations, adjustments, moments of clumsiness that felt real. Trumbull later said, casting amputee actors was the best decision he made on the film. Not because it was innovative or groundbreaking, though it was both, but because it gave the robots souls. And in a movie about what it means to be human, that mattered more than anything. Joan Baez didn't visit the set. She didn't meet Trumbull. She didn't watch dailies or ask about the story. She just wrote the music. Trumbull wanted something haunting, something that felt like Earth singing its own eulogy. He approached Baez, a folk icon known for protest songs and raw emotional power, and sent her a rough cut with temp music. She watched it once, then disappeared into her studio. Weeks passed, Trumbull started to worry. Then, the tapes arrived. 2 original songs, 1 instrumental theme, all written specifically for the film. The music wasn't just background, it was a voice. It carried the weight of loss that Dern's character couldn't express, the grief of watching a world die in silence. When Trumbull played the recordings for the first time on set, the crew went quiet. Some teared up, because Baez had captured something they'd been chasing for months, but couldn't quite name. That ache, that mourning, the feeling of being the last person who remembers something beautiful. Her voice drifted through the void like a message from a planet that no longer existed. The studio didn't understand it. They thought the songs were too melancholy, too slow, too weird for a science fiction film. They wanted something more traditional, more heroic. Trumbull fought back. He told them the music wasn't decoration, it was the heartbeat. And if they replaced it, they'd kill the movie. They backed down, and Joan Baez's voice became inseparable from silent running, a reminder that sometimes the quietest sound is the one that screams the loudest. The forest domes weren't full of real plants. They couldn't be. A living ecosystem under stage lights would have died in days, wilted, rotted, or been destroyed by the constant heat and trampling of crew. So the production team built them. Thousands of artificial trees, ferns, bushes, all handcrafted from plastic foam and wire. But Trumbull wanted texture, depth, life. So they didn't just build one forest, they built layers. Foreground plants were highly detailed, painted by hand, given realistic imperfections. Background foliage was simpler, abstract, designed to blur under depth of field. Scattered throughout, hidden among the fakes, were real plants. Ferns that would survive a few days of shooting. Small saplings that added organic movement when fans blew air through the set. Flowers that would wilt naturally, giving the environment a lived-in, dying quality that matched the story. The mix was genius. From Dern's perspective, walking through the dome, it felt alive. The camera couldn't tell the difference. And when lighting shifted, when shadows played across the artificial leaves, it looked like a forest breathing. But maintaining the illusion was constant work. Plants had to be repositioned after every take. Ferns bent by Dern's footsteps had to be reset. Flowers that died overnight had to be replaced before the next day's shoot. The crew joked that they were gardeners and filmmakers in equal measure. And in a strange way, that was true, because silent running wasn't just about preserving nature. It was about building it, nurturing it, fighting to keep it alive even when everything was stacked against you. And that metaphor played out every single day on set.
Hear Joan Baez sing.
The spacewalk sequence nearly killed someone, not from an accident, from heat stroke. Trumbull wanted the scene to feel claustrophobic, dangerous, like Freeman Lowell was one mistake away from floating into the void forever. So they built a full-scale replica of the ship's exterior and suspended Dern on wires in a spacesuit. The problem? The suit was airtight. No ventilation, no cooling system, just Bruce Dern sealed inside heavy fabric and plastic under blazing studio lights. The scene required multiple takes. Dern hung in the harness for hours, sweating through every layer, his vision fogging, his breathing shallow. At one point, he signaled to come down. The crew lowered him, peeled off the helmet, and found him drenched, pale, barely able to stand. Medics checked his vitals. Dehydration, overheating. They told Trumbull he needed a break. Dern refused. He drank water, sat under a fan for 10 minutes, then climbed back into the suit. He later said he understood what Lowell was going through, that desperation, that willingness to endure anything for something bigger than himself. Whether that was method acting or just stubbornness, no one quite knew. But Trumbull kept the cameras rolling, and when you watch that scene, when you see Lowell clinging to the hull, struggling against his own fragility, you're not just watching a performance. You're watching a man push himself to the edge because the story demanded it. That's not acting, that's survival. And somehow, it became the same thing.
And running.
The film's most iconic shot, the final image of the lone forest dome drifting through space, wasn't planned. Trumbull shot the ending as scripted. Freeman Lowell gone, the forest continuing without him, tended by a single drone. Clean, elegant, sad. But when the editing team assembled the rough cut, something felt missing. The moment didn't breathe. It didn't linger. Trumbull went back to the miniature stage, set up the dome model one more time, and shot additional footage. Slow push-ins, long, drifting moves. The camera holding on the glowing greenhouse, suspended in the infinite black, a fragile bubble of green in the void. He didn't have a specific plan. He just knew he needed more time with that image. When he cut it together, he let the shot run. 30 seconds, 40, longer than any studio executive would allow. Joan Baez's voice swelled over the silence, and suddenly the ending wasn't just sad, it was transcendent. A tiny, impossible garden floating through space, carrying the last memory of Earth. The studio watched the new cut and hated it. Too slow, they said, too depressing, too artsy. Trumbull told them it stayed, or he walked. They blinked first, and that final shot became the image that defined the film. Not because it was dramatic or action-packed, but because it understood something simple and devastating. Hope doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it just looks like a light, still burning long after everyone is gone. When Universal screened Silent Running for test audiences, the reaction was split. Half loved it, half walked out confused, even angry. One comment card reportedly said, "Why does the hero kill his friends? This isn't Star Wars." That last part was especially frustrating for Trumbull, because Star Wars wouldn't exist for another 5 years. But the studio understood the complaint. Audiences in 1972 expected space movies to be adventures. Heroes fighting alien monsters, exploring strange worlds, saving the day. Silent Running gave them a murderer, a man who sabotages his own mission, then spends the rest of the film talking to robots and plants. No battles, no villains, no aliens. Just loneliness, regret, and the slow unraveling of one man's mind. Universal panicked. They considered reshoots, maybe add a rescue mission, maybe make Lowell more sympathetic, maybe give it a happier ending. Trumbull refused everything. He'd made the movie he wanted to make. If audiences didn't get it, that was fine. Not every story is for everyone. The studio backed down but slashed the marketing budget. They dumped it into theaters with minimal promotion, expecting it to disappear quietly. Instead, something strange happened. Critics loved it. Film students obsessed over it. Environmental groups embraced it as a rallying cry. Slowly, quietly, silent running found its people. Not the masses, not the blockbuster crowd, but the ones who understood what Trumbull was really saying. That sometimes the cost of caring too much is everything, and sometimes that's the only choice worth making. The spaceship's explosion scenes used real explosives. No miniatures blown up in post, no clever editing tricks. Actual charges rigged to actual models, detonated on camera in real time. Trumbull, trained under Kubrick's practical effects philosophy, didn't believe in faking what he could build. So, when the script called for the Valley Forge's companion ships to be destroyed, he and his effects team constructed detailed miniatures, rigged them with small explosive charges, and set them off in a controlled environment. One take, one chance. If the explosion didn't look right, if the timing was off, if the camera missed the moment, there was no redo. The model was gone. The budget couldn't afford replacements. The team rehearsed the camera moves obsessively. They calculated blast radius, debris patterns, the exact moment the charge would detonate. When the day came, everyone was on edge. Cameras rolled, the charge fired, and for a split second, the hangar filled with fire, smoke, and flying metal. When the smoke cleared, the cinematographer checked the footage. Perfect. The explosion was captured in sharp, terrifying detail. Tiny fragments spinning through space, the superstructure collapsing in slow motion. The kind of destruction that felt real because it was real. Trumbull later said those shots taught him something important. You can't fake consequence. If the stakes aren't real for the people making the film, they won't be real for the audience either. And in silent running, where every choice carried weight, where every loss mattered, nothing could be faked. The drones had a serious problem. They kept breaking. The suits were fragile, the performers couldn't see, and the ship's metal deck was unforgiving. During one scene, Huey had to roll a plant cart across the hangar. Simple choreography. But the performer inside misjudged the distance, hit a support beam, and the suit's arm mechanism shattered. Filming stopped for 3 days while the prop department rebuilt it. Another time, Dewey's suit malfunctioned mid-scene. The internal harness that supported the performer's weight failed. He collapsed inside the shell, trapped, unable to signal for help. The crew noticed something was wrong only when the drone stopped moving entirely. They carefully dismantled the suit and pulled him out, shaken but uninjured. Trumbull realized the drones were as vulnerable as the forest they were protecting, so he built that fragility into the story. The robots weren't invincible machines. They stumbled, they struggled, they needed care, and that made them more human than most of the actual humans in the film. Bruce Dern improvised one of the film's most haunting moments. In the scene where Lowell realizes he's destroyed everything he fought to save, Dern was supposed to deliver a scripted monologue. But when the cameras rolled, he went silent. He just sat there, staring at nothing, breathing. 30 seconds passed. Then, a minute. The script supervisor looked at Trumbull, confused. Should they cut? Trumbull shook his head. Keep rolling. Dern's face shifted through grief, rage, emptiness. No words, just a man collapsing under the weight of what he'd done. When Trumbull finally called cut, Dern looked up and quietly asked if they needed another take. Trumbull said no. What he'd just captured was something no script could write. The moment stayed in the film exactly as Dern performed it. Silent, devastating. Proof that sometimes the loudest screams are the ones you never hear. Number 13. The film's environmental message wasn't subtle, but it wasn't preachy either. Trumbull walked a razor's edge. He wanted to show what humanity loses when it abandons nature, but he didn't want to lecture. So he made Freeman Lowell complicated, fanatical, murderous even. The message wasn't save the planet. It was, look what happens when caring becomes madness. Test audiences struggled with it. Some thought the film was anti-environmentalist because the hero was clearly unhinged. Others thought it didn't go far enough, but Trumbull refused to clarify. He said the ambiguity was the point. Real issues don't have clean heroes or simple answers. Freeman Lowell saved the forest. He also killed 3 people. Both things are true, and the film never tells you how to feel about that. Critics in 1972 didn't know what to do with that complexity. But decades later, as environmental collapse became less theoretical and more lived, Silent Running's refusal to provide easy answers felt prophetic. Number 14. Douglas Trumbull had a secret cameo. You never see his face, but his voice is everywhere. He provided the distorted radio transmissions from Earth, the garbled commands that order the forest domes destroyed. Trumbull processed his own voice through filters, modulators, and layers of static until it became unrecognizable, mechanical, cold. He wanted Earth's voice to sound inhuman, disconnected, like a civilization so far removed from nature it had forgotten how to speak with warmth. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who built the film, who fought for the forest on screen, became the voice demanding their destruction. Years later, Trumbull admitted it felt appropriate, because Silent Running wasn't just about Freeman Lowell. It was about the people who gave the orders, the ones who decided forests were expendable, the ones who never had to watch them die. Trumbull became that voice, and every time he heard it in the final cut, it made him uncomfortable, which meant it was exactly right. Number 15. The poker scene was pure chaos. Dern and the three other crew members, played by Cliff Potts, Ron Rifkin, and Jesse Vint, had to establish their dynamic in one sequence. Trumbull wanted it loose, natural, like real people killing time and space. So he told them to actually play poker. Real cards, real game. He'd shoot it documentary style and grab whatever moments felt authentic. The actors embraced it. They dealt hands, trash-talked, improvised insults. Some of the dialogue was scripted. Most wasn't. At one point, Rifkin forgot his lines entirely and just made up new ones. Dern, staying in character, responded without breaking. The scene became a verbal sparring match, four actors trying to out-improvise each other, while Trumbull's camera circled like a predator. What ended up on screen feels raw, unpolished, real, because it was. And it made Freeman Lowell's later actions even more chilling. These weren't faceless victims, they were his friends, and he killed them anyway. Number 16. Silent Running premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. Not because Universal thought it was prestigious, but because they didn't know what else to do with it. The film didn't fit any marketing category. Too slow for action fans, too strange for mainstream audiences, too cerebral for drive-ins. So they sent it to Cannes, hoping critics might embrace what American audiences rejected. The reception was mixed. Some French critics called it a masterpiece of American melancholy. Others walked out during the forest scenes, bored by the pacing. But something unexpected happened. Student protesters, environmentalists, and counterculture groups latched onto it. They held screenings in small theaters, university halls, anywhere with a projector. Silent Running became an underground sensation across Europe, while it struggled to find audiences at home. Trumbull watched from a distance, confused and oddly proud. His film had become exactly what Freeman Lowell was fighting for. Something strange, fragile, and worth preserving, even if no one else understood why. Number 17. The ending was reshot. Not because Trumbull changed his mind, but because the studio demanded proof Freeman Lowell was really dead. In the original cut, you see Lowell program the drone, open the airlock, and walk into the void. Cut to black. The dome drifts away. But test audiences weren't sure. Maybe he survived, maybe he's floating out there. The ambiguity drove Universal insane. They wanted closure, a body, confirmation. Trumbull refused to show a corpse. That wasn't the point, so he compromised. He added one shot. Lowell's empty spacesuit drifting slowly past camera, tumbling through the darkness. 3 seconds, that's all, but it was enough. Audiences understood. The studio relaxed, and Trumbull got to keep his ending intact. That compromise, that 3-second addition, saved the film's final act from studio interference. Because sometimes you don't fight every battle, you just give them enough to stop asking questions. Number 18. The geodesic domes weren't invented for the film. They were based on real designs by Buckminster Fuller, the architect and futurist who believed humanity's salvation lay in sustainable, self-contained ecosystems. Trumbull was obsessed with Fuller's work. He saw the domes not as science fiction props, but as practical solutions to real problems. How do you preserve life in a hostile environment? You build a shell. You create a closed system. You fight for every breath. The production design team studied Fuller's patents, his writings, his theories. They built the dome structures to look functional, not fantastical. Every support beam had a purpose. Every panel served a function. And when you watch Silent Running, when you see those glowing greenhouses floating through space, you're not just seeing movie magic. You're seeing a vision of survival. Fuller never saw the film. He died in 1983, but his influence shaped every frame. And somewhere in that final image, his dream of a better world drifts through the cosmos, still hoping someone will remember. Bruce Dern never watched the finished film with an audience. He attended the premiere, sat through the screening, then walked out during the credits without speaking to anyone. Trumbull found him outside, smoking, staring at nothing. He asked if Dern was okay. Dern said he didn't know. He'd just spent 2 hours watching himself play a character he wasn't sure he liked, doing things he wasn't sure were forgivable. The performance haunted him, not because it was bad, but because it was too real. He'd found something dark inside himself to create Freeman Lowell, something he didn't want to look at directly. Years later, Dern said Silent Running was the hardest role of his career, not physically, but emotionally. Because when you play a man who destroys everything in the name of saving something, you have to understand him. And understanding him meant admitting that same capacity lived somewhere inside you too. That's the price of honesty. And Dern paid it fully. Silent Running influenced everything that came after, but most people never knew it. Ridley Scott watched it before designing the Nostromo for Alien, that lived-in industrial ship aesthetic, all rust and shadows. Andrew Stanton studied it obsessively before creating Wall-E, a lonely robot tending the last garden. Duncan Jones built Moon's entire emotional framework around one man, one station, one breaking point. Christopher Nolan referenced it when crafting Interstellar's agricultural collapse, that desperate fight to save something green in a dying world. The fingerprints were everywhere, but Trumbull never got credit. And worse, he never got to make another film like it. Hollywood wanted his effects work, not his stories. They hired him to build impossible visuals for Star Trek, Blade Runner, The Tree of Life. He revolutionized how movies looked, created images that defined entire genres, but he rarely controlled what they said. Studios treated him like a tool, a genius technician who could solve impossible problems, then sent him home when the magic was done. In interviews late in his life, Trumbull admitted Silent Running was his most personal work, not his most successful, not his most acclaimed, not his most profitable, but the one that came closest to his heart. A film about trying to save something beautiful while everything around you burns, about being the last person who remembers what was lost, about keeping a light on in the dark, even when you know no one's coming back to see it. He never stopped believing in that mission. He never stopped fighting for stories that mattered, and neither did the film. Decades later, Silent Running still floats through the void, a message in a bottle drifting through space, still waiting, still hoping, still believing someone somewhere will finally listen. The trees had understudies. During production, Trumbull worried the artificial plants wouldn't photograph well in certain lighting conditions. The plastic leaves looked fake up close. The foam bark didn't catch light the way real wood did. So he arranged for backup. Real trees on standby, living insurance for moments when authenticity mattered most. A nursery in Los Angeles agreed to supply small saplings and ferns that could be swapped in for close-ups, charging the production per tree, per day. Only problem, the trees died within 48 hours under studio lights. Every single time. The heat was too intense, the air too dry. No amount of water or care could keep them alive in that artificial environment. So the production kept ordering more, cycling through dozens of real plants for brief shots that lasted mere seconds on screen. Delivery trucks arrived weekly with fresh greenery, and weekly more died. The crew started calling it the tree morgue, a corner of the set where dead plants piled up between takes, brown and wilted, casualties of cinema. Ironically, a film about preserving the last forests on Earth killed more trees than anyone wanted to admit. Trumbull never publicized this detail. He knew the optics were terrible, knew the contradiction was too painful. But it taught him something crucial about filmmaking, something he carried for the rest of his career. Sometimes, to capture the illusion of life, You sacrifice the real thing. You destroy what you're trying to honor. And that uncomfortable truth, that impossible choice, became Silent Running's most honest metaphor. You can't save everything. You can only decide what's worth trying for, and live with the cost of your convictions.